entre el inglés y el español el día de hoy. Y para eso vamos a estar utilizando la herramienta de interpretación de Zoom.
Hi, everyone. I am here with my co-interpreter, Alexia. My name is Andrea Valencia. We will be interpreting between English and Spanish. And for that, we will be using the Zoom interpreting feature.
La opción de interpretación ya está activada. Entonces, para las personas que están uniéndose a través de una computadora, van a ver un pequeño icono en forma de globo que va a aparecer en la parte de abajo. Ahí le dan clic, seleccionan en su canal ya sea inglés o español y ahí pueden escuchar la reunión del día de hoy.
And so the Zoom interpreting feature is already active, so you may follow along our instructions as we provide them. If you're joining through a computer today, you should be able to see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Please click there and select your language of preference, either English or Spanish.
Todavía no estamos utilizando la función, eso va a suceder después de este anuncio. Entonces, sí les pedimos que escuchen nada más este breve introducción y después podremos acceder a la función.
And so the feature is active, but us as interpreters are not there in the room just yet. So we just ask you to follow along these steps, and in a few seconds, once we indicate it, you'll be able to hear us in the tuned in channel.
Y si estamos uniéndonos a través de un teléfono o de una tableta, el botón va a ser un poco diferente. Son 3 puntos y dice más o more. Le damos clic ahí, después vamos al menú de interpretación de idiomas y después seleccionamos el canal de inglés o español, ya sea cual sea su preferencia.
If you're joining through a smartphone or a tablet, this interpretation button may look a little bit different. You may have to tap on the screen to bring up the 3-dot menu that says more, then select language interpretation, and then select your language as either English or Spanish, and don't forget to tap done in order to activate the selection.
Y sí les pedimos a todas las personas que no se sientan 100% cómodas en los dos idiomas, inglés o español, que por favor seleccionen su canal al inicio de la reunión y se queden ahí por la duración de nuestro tiempo juntos el día de hoy.
And so we ask that for anybody that doesn't feel 100% confident in either English or Spanish, to please make us a language selection so that you can remain in that language selection for the whole duration of the meeting.
Y nada más brevemente, un recordatorio de por favor hablar a un paso moderado cuando estemos compartiendo la información y también por favor mantener nuestro micrófono en silencio cuando no estemos participando para poder minimizar todo el ruido de fondo y que nos permitan interpretar y compartir la información de la mejor forma posible.
And so we ask for anybody that may be presenting today or participating in the meeting asking questions, we ask that you take into account that there's interpretation so that you please speak at a moderate rhythm, such as the one that I am using right now. We also ask for all of the participants here that you keep your microphone on mute so that you restrict the background noise can be as restricted as possible so that we can interpret and have no interferences.
Eso es todo por nuestra parte. Cualquier pregunta, cualquier problema que tengan con la interpretación, háganoslo saber por la cajita del chat y les podremos ayudar. Muchas gracias y después de esto ya podemos utilizar la herramienta.
Thank you so much for listening to these instructions and following along. If you have any issue accessing interpretation, please let us know in the chat. This concludes the announcement and these instructions. So now we're gonna tune in into our virtual language booth. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you all so much for coming. Just a couple of things before you start. My name is Phoebe Dominguez. I use she, her pronouns. I am a youth climate activist here in Colorado, and I have been volunteering with 350 Colorado for 2 years. I run the Youth Action Committee, and I will be your moderator today. FYI, we are live streaming and recording this, so if you are uncomfortable with your video being shown, please turn it off. We will be hearing from speakers, and then we will be going into a Q&A portion that will not be recorded. So you are welcome to turn your camera on at that portion if you are comfortable. Awesome. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I am super excited for all of us to learn about ozone and what we can do. We have a couple of speakers and an amazing lineup, might I say. Our first speaker is Becca Curry. Becca Curry is an attorney with the Colorado Policy Council with Earth Justice, a nationwide environmental law organization. She focuses on advancing environmental justice, protecting community health, curbing toxic pollution, and addressing the impacts of climate change. Previously, she has worked with ACLU of Colorado and one of the ACLU of Mississippi, working to expose debtors' prisons. Take it away.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see you all here to learn about pollution together. So I'm going to give us some context about air pollution in general to kind of talk about where ozone fits in the bigger picture. And I'm just going to share my screen here. Hopefully you all can see this. Looking good? Awesome. Okay. Yeah, so in my brain, right, there's sort of three main buckets of pollution, and really those are climate pollutants. So when we talk about climate pollutants, we're talking about greenhouse gases, things that are warming the earth, particularly carbon dioxide and methane, which ultimately sort of breaks down into carbon dioxide. Criteria pollutants, which are a set of only 6 pollutants, important pollutants, but a set of only 6, for which the EPA, our Environmental Protection Agency, has set what are called the NAAQS standards, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards. We'll talk about those more in a minute. And then the final bucket being toxic pollutants, which are 188 at least pollutants known to cause cancer or other serious health effects. And there is some overlap between these buckets. For example, benzene is both an ozone precursor and ozone is a criteria pollutant. And it's considered in that conversation, but benzene is also a toxic pollutant. It's known to cause leukemia. It's a carcinogen. And so it's sort of, there are some pollutants that fall into both buckets. And yeah, so looking deeper at those buckets, we know the climate pollutants here in Colorado. A couple of years back, Colorado passed a big law that sort of set statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction targets, 26% by 2025, 50% by 2030, and 90% by 2050 compared to 2005 levels. And the state sort of adopted this greenhouse gas reduction roadmap that they're working to implement to meet these targets. And then there was a second piece of legislation just a few years back that set some sector-specific greenhouse gas reduction goals. And there's one rulemaking ongoing that is implementing a target specific to the manufacturing and industrial sector. Moving on to that next bucket, this is where ozone falls. These criteria pollutants, again, it's this set of only 6 pollutants for which the EPA has set these national ambient air quality standards. And sorry, ozone's just hanging out in the middle of my slide there. But yes, ozone is one of those, but it includes these 6 pollutants include carbon monoxide, lead, nitrogen dioxide, particulate matter, ozone, and sulfur dioxide. And, the 2 criteria pollutants that are particularly relevant in Colorado and Denver are ozone and particulate matter. That many of the North Denver metro area. It's this area that's sort of highlighted in purple on this map here, is in non-attainment I think I'm getting a message to speak slower, maybe. Yeah. It's a non-attainment area for ozone, meaning that we have not for many years met the EPA's ambient air quality standard for ozone. We have been exceeding that level by quite a bit here, and the problem is getting worse. So us being in non-attainment here in the Denver metro area means that the state has to put together what's called a SIP, a state implementation plan, which is supposed to be the state's plan to comply with the next to get back into attainment. And ozone is really, it's a highly reactive gas. I'm sure we'll hear more from Detlev later on, but it's a significant contributor to haze in the area. So when you see that brown cloud, it's likely ozone. And then the final bucket of, first, I just kind of pop this in here because we know that fracking operations and oil and gas wells are a huge source of ozone precursors that contribute to our ozone problem here in Colorado. And this is just a map that shows the location of all of the individual oil and gas wells across Colorado. So each individual red dot is an oil and gas well, and some of those wells might have multiple sort of lines going down into the earth. And that final bucket, is toxic pollution. So these are also often accompany ozone precursor emissions, and they're often might see them called hazardous air pollutants by the EPA, but essentially we're talking about this set of 188 chemicals that are known to pose a risk of cancer or cause other serious health impacts. Unlike the 6 criteria pollutants that includes ozone, the EPA has not set the ambient air quality standard for toxics. So with criteria pollutants, they've told us what the goal is. They've told us the maximum amount that we should have in the air, but with toxics, they have not done that. So we don't, to date, we haven't had an enforceable maximum amount that's allowed in the air. But just recently, Colorado adopted House Bill 1244, just this past legislative session, which will significantly increase sort of monitoring and reporting of toxic emissions, and also directs the state to set those ambient air quality standards and adopt control measures that will reduce levels of toxics. And another just graphic about emission sources of toxics across Colorado. And just quickly, this is my last slide. This is just a snapshot of the state's monitoring network of where the state has air monitors. So this doesn't include like third-party and non-state monitoring, but it's, the monitoring that they're doing is pretty limited, and it's very much focused on the criteria pollutants, and there's very little monitoring that's happening right now of toxics. In fact, we really just have one site that is really looking at toxics, and it's out in Grand Junction. So I'll pause there. That was sort of just meant as an overview of air pollution in general, so we can see where ozone fits in the bigger picture.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. It's so weird to me that there's not as many or not that much air monitoring in Colorado as I thought. We obviously need more. Our next speaker is Christy Haas Howard. She uses she, her pronouns. Christy is a school nurse, an asthma educator, and a mother of 3 children with asthma, and a volunteer with Moms Clean Air Force living in the Denver metro area. She has been supporting air quality programs in school for several years and enjoys educating children and families on air quality and health impacts, especially asthma. She loves growing vegetables and walking her dogs. Thank you so much for speaking and joining us today, Christy. And speak away, educate us.
Thank you, Phoebe. Good evening, everyone. I'm grateful to be able to share with you for a few minutes about ozone and your health. I care about air quality and health for a variety of reasons. As you heard in my bio, my children have asthma. and I know the fear of a parent watching their child struggle to breathe. I also have older family members living in Denver with respiratory issues. Our family lives on the Front Range, and as you just learned, we are we're at Ozone non-attainment area. And professionally, I'm a school nurse and asthma educator, and I also volunteer with Moms Clean Air Force. So there are many reasons why this topic is near and dear to my heart. So first, I'd like you to think about your own families and your own loved ones. This is a list of those that are at highest risk from ozone exposure. Who do you care about that is a child, an elder, an outdoor worker, someone with asthma? Children are at greatest risk from exposure to ozone because their lungs are still developing, and they're more likely to be active outdoors when ozone levels are high, which increases their exposure. As you can imagine, people who work outdoors also have higher exposure than other groups because it's their job to be outside for extended periods of time. People with asthma already have compromised lungs, so they're more susceptible to harm from ozone. There's a recent study out of Yale School of Public Health that found a link between long-term exposure to ozone in older adults and an increase in cognitive decline. So exposure to ozone can cause coughing and a sore throat. It can also make it difficult to take a deep breath, even causing pain. Ozone can damage your airways, making you more susceptible to infection and possibly developing asthma. Ozone aggravates lung diseases. Short-term exposure to ozone can lead to ER visits and work and school absences. So this not only affects our health, but our productivity and ability to earn money and support our families. Ozone's specific impacts on people with asthma are multiple. It can make your lungs not work as well, causing shortness of breath. This will increase the use of quick reliever medication and possibly end with an urgent visit to a healthcare provider. Ozone could also cause more frequent asthma episodes. I've seen this firsthand in my family. My son, who has asthma, was playing on a sports team outside in the evening on a high ozone day, and he felt pain and burning while breathing. He had to use his quick reliever medication much more than usual that evening. So now we're going to take a minute to talk about some things you can do to protect yourself and your loved ones from the health impacts of ozone. First of all, it's helpful to know when there is a high ozone day. So you can receive air quality alerts if you sign up at enviroflash.info. Feel free to take a moment right now if you want. On your phone, you can sign up for air quality alerts. Just go to enviroflash.info. You can also see your current and forecasted air quality at airnow.gov, which pulls from those monitors that we just learned about. So what is your current air quality? Pull up airnow.gov to see. When I pulled it up this afternoon on my phone, I noticed that both today and tomorrow are forecasted to be high ozone days and unhealthy for sensitive groups. Remember, we just talked about those high-risk groups. Those people are the sensitive groups. When I look right now, I have this pulled up on my phone. It has ozone at being 115, which is considered unhealthy for sensitive groups right now. And it's been going up throughout the afternoon. So other precautions you can take include arranging your outdoor activities for the morning on a day that's forecasted to be high ozone, if you're able. If you have any lung disease, make sure that you're taking your medications as prescribed. And if you haven't seen your healthcare provider in a while, consider making an appointment for a checkup. So August is not only high ozone season here along the Front Range, but it's also back to school time for many children. So if you're a student or you have a student in your family who has asthma, make sure you have a second quick relief inhaler for school and get a Colorado Asthma Care Plan for school completed by your provider before school starts. Your school nurse is eager to support you and your family. There are other actions you can take to help reduce ozone in the longer term that will be addressed by the other presenters. Thank you for your time, and I believe we'll be taking questions at the end.
Thank you so much, Christy. My ozone right now, or my air quality, is 115 as well. So, well, yeah. Thank you so much. I will definitely be taking more precautions now that I know. Our next speaker is Dr. Helmig. He has been working in the field of atmospheric monitoring and air quality research for a sum of 35 years, with affiliations with the statewide Air Pollution Research Center at the University of Colorado, the National Center of Atmospheric Research, and the University of Colorado. During the most recent years, he has shifted his research to regional northern Colorado, Front Range air quality studies under the umbrella of his private company, Boulder Air. Thank you for sharing with us today, and tell us.
Good. Thank you for the introduction. Good to be on the call again and see you all. Can you see my slide? Does the sharing work? Okay, good. All right, so I was asked to present in 5 minutes, which is impossible. I always go over, you know me by now. I'll try. I have 6 slides. The first one, yeah, I think most of you know what we're doing. This air monitoring in the Front Range here. The map on the right side shows the dots where we have these monitoring stations operating, and most of them measure ozone as well. And you can get all this data from our website. I put a screenshot there on the left side. If you want to look that up. So, oops, this is, let me use the arrows here. Let's see. Oops. Let's see. Okay, that's better. So, point 1. Ozone is not emitted. I see this over and over still now. I see it in the paper sometimes, you know, emissions of ozone. No, there's no such thing. Ozone is not emitted. Ozone is not emitted. It's not emitted. It's formed in the atmosphere. It's formed, many of you know that, it's formed from precursors that we emit, pollutants that are released in the atmosphere. And there are 2 important classes, volatile organic compounds and nitrogen oxides. So you've seen cartoons such as the one on the left. It's very complicated for a scientist. It's super interesting. It's so complex. You never stop learning about it. And there are many different sources for these VOCs and the nitrogen oxides. And then the other thing you need to get this moving is ozone, is sunlight. So you need sunlight, VOCs, and nitrogen oxides. And then that's not the full story. The amount of ozone that you form is not linear to one or the other, but you need both. So this graph on the right side with this blue to red colors that shows you how much ozone is formed depending on how much VOCs you have, which is on the bottom on the x-axis, and the NOx is on the y-axis. So you see, if you only have one of them, if you only have high NOx or high VOCs, you're blue. You're just blue. You don't have much ozone, but you need both. You need the mixture of both of them, and at a certain ratio, that's where you get the highest ozone. If only you have one or the other one is lower, much lower than the other one, it's not really all that bad. That's why in some areas you get more ozone than in other areas, because they're the mixture, the ratio of VOCs and NOx is just right to get the maximum amount of ozone. And as I said, you need the sunlight, and that's reflected in the graph at the bottom. That shows the previous 6 days to this day, to yesterday of ozone here in the Front Range. These are data from 6 different stations. The 6 colors are all different stations here in the Front Range. And what you see is that it actually behaves pretty similarly among these stations. There's some deviation, some drop lower, but overall they go pretty closely together because ozone is a regional pollutant. You cannot run away from it. You cannot move to the neighbor city and be in much better shape. It's here, it's with you, it's with us. And it's very similar across the Front Range. They're just subtle deviations, really. And you see it goes up and down every day. These are 6 days. It roughly drops to about half during the night The minimum is early in the morning, and then it goes up, something like 10 parts per billion per hour gets added during the day. It goes up and up and up, and it reaches the maximum in the mid to late afternoon hours. And the maxima here in this region are often 2 times as high as what we have in the night. So very dynamic behavior. And that also relates to something that was mentioned just in the previous presentation. You know, if you're worried about ozone, you want to go outside, you want to exercise, do it in the morning. You can see in the morning, it's so much lower. Don't go out in the afternoon. Unfortunately, a lot of the school sports, they happen in the afternoon. You know, worst time of the day, really. So really shovel this around. Do the sports in the morning and have them sit in the classroom in the afternoon, because inside ozone is much lower than outside. But you know, a lot of the school sports are happening the worst time of the day in terms of ozone. You've seen this already. I don't want to repeat this. You know, ozone is a strong oxidant. It's an irritant. It damages, irritates the respiratory system. People are outside, young people, older folks, athletes are mostly impacted. The main point I want to adhere to what's been said already is that ozone is also greenhouse gas. It's not really significant greenhouse gas. So if you're worried about climate change, global warming, you know, we see CO2 and methane in the media all the time, and our goals to bring those emissions down. But ozone is also warming the atmosphere, and the ozone that we are adding to the atmosphere, not the natural, just the part of ozone that we're adding, is estimated to drive 8% of the climate warming. Yeah, so that's pretty significant. It matters also as a climate driver. This is ozone from the last summer here in the Front Range. Again, there's 6 different stations here, and this is the 8-hour averaged ozone. And I'll tell you in a moment why we're doing it over 8 hours. It shows, you know, the ozone readings day after day. You see it go up and down, you know, as we just saw in the 6-day window. And the dotted line there at the value 70, it's the ozone national ambient air quality standard. And you can see, you know, that we exceeded that quite often during the last season. If I count all these exceedances, I get 53 for last year. So far this year, we've been quite a bit better. We've had 8 exceedances so far as of right now, but we're just about halfway through the ozone season. Now I put down here at the bottom the definition, how this is calculated. And it's so bad, it's so complicated, it's so confusing that I don't want you to memorize this or try to understand. But just to know, it's not really all that simple. So in the United States, the compliance with that ambient air quality standard is determined by what's called a design value, which is calculated as the mean of 3 consecutive years of the 4th highest annual value for the maximum daily average 8-hour ozone value. Bang, you know, who can repeat this? It's complicated. It makes sense, you know, if you work with this for a while, you kind of start understanding it. The idea behind that is we want to not just look at 1 or 2 extreme values. We don't want to just look at spikes that just last an hour or 2. We average over 8 hours. And that's the data I've shown here. And we just don't want to just look at 1 or 2 bad days. Let's just pick the 4th highest every year. And then we just take the average over 3 years of that. That's how this whole thing is determined. It's very different than in other countries. And also this health threshold value is higher than in other countries. So it's 70. Actually, you know, even 70.9 is still in compliance. 70.9 is still not exceedance. The way it's considered, it actually needs to be 71.0. It's truncated, it's not rounded. So 71 is an exceedance, 70.9 is still okay. That's how it's in the United States. It's not like that in other countries. And as you can see, the EU, Japan, and Canada, they have lower threshold values, so they provide or try to attain, you know, higher degree of protection than what we have in the United States here. So then, depending on how often and how severely you exceed the standard, the region is classified as a non-attainment area. and the EPA reviews this every so many years. And there have been two significant changes just in the last few years in the Front Range. And in both of these instances, the classification was changed to a more severe exceedance violation or non-attainment of the air standard. So in 2019, the EPA reclassified Denver area to a serious non-attainment for ozone. And then just this year in April, it was downgraded even more from serious to severe. That's the last slide, but I'm going to show you how that compares with the remainder of the United States. These two maps show regions that are in non-attainment with the Ozone National Ambient Air Quality Standard. So you can see that actually most of the United States is in somewhat better shape than we are. It's white, which means there's no problem. There's not this problem with exceeding the ozone standard. You can see in the Colorado area here on the left side, that's the consideration for the, there's an older standard from 2008, which is 75 parts per billion. And that's actually where we were just reclassified to severe. So the color coding here on the map is actually outdated. I could not find an updated version of that map. So the Front Range here in Colorado should actually be in this orange brown color, which puts us in the company of the Central Valley in California and Southern California, which are the only other areas in the United States that are classified as severe at this time in terms of the ozone exceedance. And then there's another standard that was implemented in 2015. That's the map on the right. So that's the 70 parts per billion standard. And here we are currently considered a marginal non-attainment. That's a newer standard, so it hasn't been observed for all that long. But there is a rule in preparation to bump us up to moderate, which would then put us in the yellow zone here. And you can see again for that standard, again, the only regions that have a similarly concerning exceedance of the ozone standard in the United States, or again, the Central Valley in California and Southern California. Other than that, other regions in the United States do not experience as much of an ozone pollution as we have here in the Colorado Front Range. And that's my last slide, and I doubt I stayed within 5 minutes, but hopefully you've found it informative and got something new out of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Helmig. Yeah, it's bizarre. I am learning along with everyone here. I am learning a lot. And it's summer, so I'm ahead of the game. Our next panelist is Representative Tracy Burnett, whose dedication is to help others fight for a better future, is what led her to election as a House District 12 state representative in November of 2020. This is her first term as an elected official. Improving her community has always been an in-person passion for Tracy. She ran her campaigns prioritizing 3 main issues: environment, education, and equity, and continues to prioritize these important issues throughout her time as a state legislator. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi.
It is awesome to have you.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I hope we can make the screen a little bit bigger. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for coming today. Yeah, I'm Colorado State Representative Tracy Burnett. I represent Eastern Boulder County. And I just want to thank Christy for spelling out, especially what ozone does to asthma. My son nearly died of an asthma attack when he was a toddler. And I'm a world-class runner, but I have asthma, and I check both the weather and the ozone levels on my app before I run, because I have had asthma attacks because of the ozone levels here. So about a year ago, I started, so this is one of the main reasons I ran for office, is to help bend a curve on ozone. I started working on this issue about a year ago, working with Dr. Helmig and Becca Curry and other scientists and experts and environmentalists to understand the problem and also what can be done about it. So I'd have to say I am really encouraged by the work that was done this year in the legislature. And so I'm just going to briefly go over that, but then there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So first of all, this year, it's really important that people understand that the health department, I refer to as a CDPHE, the health department has been understaffed for years. And so it's so one of the things the legislature did this year is we really increased the staffing, the funding for staffing. And so that's we need to build the infrastructure to be able to really fix this problem. That's one thing. We also did a lot of investments in air quality monitoring in several different areas. These are for the criteria pollutants that Becca Curry had talked about. It's more frequent sampling, as well as aerial monitoring, as well as on-site mobile monitoring. These are all things that are very important to help us understand how we can bend the curve on ozone. We also made investments in electric school buses and an e-bike program, reduced and free bus fares, because transportation is a big piece of the ozone issue we have here in Colorado, as well as many, many grants for things like reducing industrial emissions, lower emission types of aviation fuel, diesel truck, reduced emissions. And one of my big bills was building energy codes, because this is to use less gas or get off gas, transition to no gas to heat our homes and to heat our water and to heat our food, because gas is methane. It's extracted from fracked gas wells. So this is another way to reduce our, our ozone issue here. Becca already talked about the air toxics bill that was passed. That was very important. And then another thing that I worked on a lot was a stationary sources investment. And what this is a lot of the permitting, the reporting, the violations, and all this kind of stuff is done very manually right now. And so this is a 3-year program to automate all of that. And so that also is a way that we can make sure that we keep bending the curve on ozone. I'm also really happy to report that at the end of session, I asked the Polis administration, I asked them to do things that he can do administratively to keep moving forward on air quality. And a couple of weeks ago, Governor Polis did come out with some executive actions. And so I'm going to talk about those a little bit more. If you can move on to the next slide. There's many things we still can do, because what we've done so far, other than working on transportation, reducing transportation, a lot of it is we're going to find out how bad our ozone problem is. We need to bend the curve. And so there's many things that we can do. First of all, I don't know if any of you guys remember the Whistleblower Report that came out a couple years, a year and a half ago, that had to do with permitting of new sources of pollutants. And this really got me started on this. One of the things we really need to work on is minor sources, the permitting when a new source of emissions, they ask for an air quality permit. Can I go ahead? I know there's going to be some emissions. Can I go ahead and do this new operation that is going to cause some emissions? And so there's a whole permitting process that goes through with that. But it mostly to date has focused on big sources of pollution, not minor sources. So those minor sources, when the Air Pollution Control Division evaluates these things, they don't often model, well, what is this going to have? What is this impact of this minor source going to have on our pollution? And guess what? Oil and gas wells, most oil and gas wells are a minor source of pollution, are considered a minor source. So most of them are not modeled today. Now, if you think about just in the Northern Front Range here, in the non-attainment area, there's tens of thousands of oil and gas wells that are all minor sources. The concern is we need, and I should say that in the Northern Front Range, oil and gas is the biggest source of the NOxes, the nitrogen dioxides, right, Dr. Helmich? And these are not going down. So this is an area that we really need to focus on. And so the good thing is that the administration, the Air Quality Pollution Control Division, is part of the Department of Health. They have a panel that's working on, well, how do we address minor source permits? And they're developing new guidelines. There's some good information there, but we need to keep the pressure on, especially if you get nothing else out of this webinar tonight. We need to look at the cumulative impact of all these minor sources, add them up, and what does that do to our ozone problem? So my call to action is to keep the pressure on for the health department to look at the cumulative impact of all these minor sources when they are doing permitting. Okay. Another one is, and I should say the executive action is they will come out, the Policy Administration will come out with a report on minor source permitting and cumulative impacts next summer. So keep that in mind. Another issue that we need to work on is the coordination between the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. They are the folk that permit new oil and gas facilities and coordinate their work with the permitting that's done for air quality permitting. So those two permits, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and the Health Department both have permits. We need to make sure that they're coordinating with each other and that they're working together and they're looking at the cumulative impacts of all these oil and gas wells. This is something, again, that Governor Polis has said, okay, I will work on this and I will have a report in, let's see, July. It looks like, I got to look at my notes here. He's going to issue a report that will identify how those two organizations are coordinating on permitting, on cumulative impacts, and also on greenhouse gas emissions. So my call to action for you is keep the pressure on. We need this information. The biggest thing that we can do right now to bend the curve on ozone is to ask industry to do its part, especially on high ozone days. We're told as citizens to reduce our driving, or maybe don't run your lawnmower on on ozone alert days. Industry needs to do this too. And that's all of industry. It's not just oil and gas, it's industry in general. And so again, this is something I'm encouraged about. There's two things that the administration is doing. First of all, well, this is my request actually, is I talked about that automated reporting system that is being built out. I've asked that it has a capability for industry to voluntarily report what actions they take on ozone alert days. So we start gathering data on that. But the Policy Administration has also said, Health Department, work with oil and gas and on this issue as well, to go ahead and start voluntarily reporting, what actions they're taking on ozone alert days. So keep the pressure on, tell industry, do your part. Another place that you can help is on that automated reporting system I talked about. I've been advocating, and the administration has agreed, to build in the capability that we have a really robust public portal so that, I call it, grandma knows what's going on with air quality in her, right in her neighborhood. And if she sees a problem, she can report it. If there's a new permit coming up in her area, she can see what it is. And my call to action to you is to let the administration know, what do you want to see in that portal? How do you want to look and feel? You know, what are those pieces? What information do you want to see? How do you want to report things out? So I have this, we don't have a date yet on when the administration will start, the health department will start reaching out to stakeholders, but stay tuned, because I said I will work with the administration to get the word out on you getting input into how this system is built out. And then finally, the other thing is the SIP, the Regional State Implementation Plan. You know, so far I've talked about permitting. You know, you get a new source of emissions, and there's permitting. Well, the state implementation plan takes kind of a top-down look at how can we bend the curve on ozone. And there's many, many things that we can do. I can list some of them. Some of them is encourage industry actions on ozone alert days, have a scientific advisory panel that helps the people doing this regional air quality control, you know, SIP plan, that you have scientific input into that plan. There's many things about lawn and garden equipment and many, many things like that. So the call to action for you is keep the pressure on to put things into that SIP now. There are 2 SIPs coming up. One of them is at the end of this year. And so the public comment time is right now. And then there'll be another SIP in a couple of years. There's many things that we can do right now to reduce ozone. So just keep the pressure on. So I've probably gone over my limit here as well. So I'll stop and be happy to answer any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Representative Burnett. It is awesome to hear from you. Thank you for being here. And definitely stay on if you have any questions. I think most of our panelists are staying on.
Sorry, I haven't gone yet.
I know, I'm
okay.
Our next speaker is Kate Merlin. She works for Wild Earth Guardians as a climate and energy program attorney for Colorado. They received their GD from Vermont Law School in 2008 and an LLM in natural resources law from CU Boulder in 2013. Recently, their work has been involved in litigation to force the state to act on dozens of overdue major sources, operating permits and raising public agencies' awareness and unaddressed cumulative impacts of oil and gas developments. I am not completely sure of what all of that means, but I am going to be very excited to learn what it means. Thank you, Kate. Take it away.
Thank you, Phoebe. Let me share my screen if I can get it right. Let's see. All right. And got to go into this presenter view. Okay. So I'm here with the call to action. Are you guys seeing just the first slide, or are you seeing a bunch of different slides? No, I'm seeing the wrong thing. Hold on. View, slideshow. There we go. All right, so this is our call to action. One of the reasons why I was talking to Kate Christensen, who did a lot of work to organize this. Thank you so much, Kate. I was talking to her about it was because I kept seeing these signs saying, high ozone alert day, drive less. And I kept seeing state representatives from AQCC, from APCD, showing up in different forums in the media, basically telling us that ozone is our fault. It's driving our cars. It's mowing our lawns. I've seen personal care products have a lot of VOCs. Reduce your VOC, use at home. Not that those things are wrong, but the elephant in the room is the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas industry is the #1 source of NOx and VOCs in the state, and the industry is not being asked to do its part. I want to thank Representative Burnett for her leadership on this issue at the State House. Your work is greatly appreciated. We need more people just like you. But we need to go farther also. We can't stop with asking industry to be more responsible. We need to ask our government to be more responsible, because at the end of the day, industry is not responsive to us. They're not responsible for us. It's our elected officials and it's the agencies that work for them. So I just wanted to provide, the quick legal overview of what the state is doing about ozone and who's making these decisions. So there's really three main players working on this issue right now. There's the Regional Air Quality Council, which is a council, I believe, made up of 9 relatively local or governments, counties, I think, in the non-attainment area. And they are putting together a draft ozone state implementation plan they're going to work on that with the Air Pollution Control Division, which is the CDPHE's air quality staff. And then they're going to bring it to AQCC, the Air Quality Control Commission, who makes the final decision on the state implementation plan. The Regional Air Quality Council, they don't have a lot of public participation going on. I went on their website to look to find, the schedule. They are accepting comments right now until August 5th, but ultimately, probably it's the Air Quality Control Commission does adopt the final SIP, and they're the ones who send it to EPA for EPA's approval. So I think targeting the Air Quality Control Commission's state implementation process, which they should be handling it sometime around November. It's on their November calendar right now. That's probably going to be a more effective target. And then also, as Rep. Burnett mentioned, the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, which does the permitting for our oil and gas facilities in the state, they need to do more because I'll talk about it in a minute. They have a statutory mandate now to evaluate and address the cumulative impacts of oil and gas development, which include, by their own admission, climate change and our ozone problems. And they have not done enough. They've actually admitted that they haven't done enough. In earlier rulemakings, they said that they intended to do more and they would get around to it. And so we're going to ask them to get around to it. Going back to just the RAC, the Regional Air Quality Council, real quickly, their authority is derived from an executive order that Governor Polis issued in 2019. They prepare the air quality plans for AQCC. But if you go on their website, their major focus is to raise awareness and to motivate behavior change. They have a website called Simple Steps Better Air, focuses entirely on encouraging people to drive less and avoid mowing their lawn. They do not focus on oil and gas production. But let me show you their own data. This is data from the RAC website showing, so this is their own data, showing that the #1 source of NOx is the oil and gas production, right? Not our consumption, it's the production. And for VOCs, blows every other category out of the water, more than double the next highest category of VOC emissions in this chart. And yet, if you look at the writing next to these charts, doesn't talk about oil and gas production. It says people who drive gas-powered vehicles. They're trying to shift the blame back to individuals. They're trying to make this an individual problem, and it's not. This is a society-wide problem, but it really stems back to our oversized oil and gas production activities, which the state is actually planning on increasing for the next decade. So the #1 thing we need to be asking the state is, all of our agencies brag uncontrollably about how great our oil and gas regulations are. And that's great. I've heard it for almost a decade now. We have the best, strongest anywhere in the nation, our regulations. But then they say they're going to expand oil and gas production for the next decade while simultaneously addressing our ozone crisis. This is insanity. This is impossible. So the oil and gas production is the elephant in the room. AQCC also, they have more authority. They're created by state statute. They're authorized by the federal U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to implement the Federal Clean Air Act in the state. But it's run by an all-volunteer commission. They hold their hearings on on the state implementation plan. We got to talk to them. A representative from the Air Pollution Control Division went to COGCC and told COGCC that cars were the #1 contributor to ozone exceedances in the state. If you look at this chart, this is what they showed the COGCC. I listened to them talk for an hour to commissioners telling them that cars were the #1 problem. Basically, oil and gas is not that big of a deal. This is our CDPHE division talking to our Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, telling the commission, don't worry about ozone. Ozone isn't your problem. This is so by far the wrong message. I had to come to you today to tell you about this because this is crazy. If you look at where their data is coming from, the light duty vehicles being at the top of this chart, you'll see that oil and gas is actually broken down into 3 separate sectors. Area sources, point sources, and oil and gas tanks are all counted out separately here. And if you add those up into oil and gas production activities, it's 1.5 times the contribution from light duty vehicles. This is just a chart of 2021 ozone exceedances. I am grateful. It seems that we've had a lower number of exceedances this summer so far, but this is last summer. We had a record number of exceedances. It was more than 20% higher than the next highest year, which was 2018, for the number of exceedances. Finally, COGCC also created by statute 5-person professional commission. They adopt and amend the rules governing oil and gas operations, including downhole and surface impacts. And in 2019, the state legislature adopted a law that requires COGCC to evaluate and address cumulative impacts of oil and gas production. And COGCC did adopt rules to do a lot of things to start evaluating the cumulative impacts of oil and gas production. But they said at that time of that rulemaking, in their statement of basis and purpose, that they knew that they had not adopted sufficient rules to address cumulative impacts, and that they fully intended to go back and adopt more rules in the future to address cumulative impacts of oil and gas production. And so far they have not done that. And so that's our second call to action, is to get involved with the COGCC and ask them for more rulemaking on cumulative impacts. Here's how you get involved. Number 1, just please resist the messaging of this being a problem of individual voluntary transportation choices. I'm not denying that cars contribute to this problem, but where's the public infrastructure for alternatives? So this is not an individual problem. This is a much larger problem. We're not going to solve it by making individuals feel guilty about driving cars, especially when our government is not doing enough to hold the main source of these emissions accountable. Number 2, tell others, speak up whenever you can. Let them know this is phony messaging, and we need to combat it. We need to educate each other. Write an op-ed, write a letter to a representative. Sign up to talk during rulemaking or provide written comments to some of these agencies. And lastly, volunteer with an organization like 350 Colorado. Get involved in working together to speak out on these issues. And finally, just stay tuned. The AQCC is revising the ozone SIP. It's currently scheduled for November, and COGCC will soon be considering a petition for rulemaking on cumulative impacts, including ozone. And I know they will be considering this because Wild Earth Guardians and 350 Colorado are going to be submitting this petition for rulemaking. And sign up for email alerts to stay tuned for specific timing and more specific calls to action. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kate, for doing our call to action and educating us on all of that. I have learned so much today. Thank you to all of the speakers for teaching us about ozone and what we can do to make a difference and how we can pressure people. I was told to do the youth call to action. So, to all the youth in the call, this is your call to action. Do this. Do everything that Kate said. Pick something on that list, do it. Because we need to be doing this too. These actions and these writing op-eds, making public comment, speaking at rulemaking, this is not just for adults. We need to be paying attention to these things because it's affecting us. It is affecting us. We're in the high risk category. Like Christy said, we're kids. We're outside and we need to be paying attention to our health. We need to be paying attention and doing things to make a difference. So pick something on that list. I'm going to be doing something. So do it with us because this is not just for adults. We need to be doing this too. Thank you to all of the speakers. If you have any questions, please stay on. We will be, our panelists will be staying and we will be doing a Q&A that is not going to be recorded. Yeah, so thank you to everyone who came. It is amazing that you all came to learn and learn more. Thank you.